Hey there. So, this video is going to be about proteins. This is the first of the polymers that we're going to talk about. And I have to say, for me, this is the most exciting macromolecule because proteins do just about everything in the cell except provide energy. So we have proteins that provide structure for our cells in our bodies. They form the framework inside the cells. They connect cells together. They even make the molecules that produce our tissues. Proteins are also the things, not the only things, but that are responsible for communication. So we have hormones that communicate from one part of the body to another that are made of protein. The receptors that the hormones stick to cause the reaction, or the receptors that we have in our nerves that allow the signal to go from one place to another. Um, Even inside the cell, proteins are involved in spreading the word to the other parts of the cell when there's an action that needs to be done. Proteins are also the thing in our cell membranes that controls what substances come in and out. So they form channels and carriers and pumps, and we're going to talk about all of those soon. For the most part, enzymes, the catalysts that make our chemical reactions go faster, are also proteins. Proteins are also super important for recognition and for protection. So, we have these proteins on the surface of our cell that act as ID molecules called antigens. And our immune system makes antibodies, which recognizes certain antigens and protects us. And we have proteins that are involved in blood clots and many other things. Finally, proteins are responsible for movement. They make up the structure of our muscles, which allows us to move our body. But proteins are also the things that allow an individual cell to move. There are little molecular motors made of protein that move chromosomes around or allow a cell to squeeze out of the blood vessel. So, proteins are super diverse and really do all the work of the cell. Now, we talked about amino acids in the monomer video, and we talked about how monomers come together to make a polymer or a dimer. Now, amino acids have a slight variation on this. So here we have two amino acids. And if you remember from the discussion of dehydration synthesis, both of those example monomers had hydroxyl groups, which were removed to form water, and then there's a bond. But amino acids don't have a hydroxyl group on their amino end. So when the enzyme that puts these together takes away the components of water, there is no oxygen between the carbon and the nitrogen, or between the two amino acids. Instead, they are linked directly together. And this bond has a special name. It is called a peptide bond. Okay, now, once we've put together, try to move me over here. Once we've put together a number of amino acids that are linked through peptide bonds, the protein still is not functional. In order to work, proteins have to be folded into a specific three-dimensional shape in order to function properly. And there are four levels to this. There's the primary structure, the secondary structure, the tertiary structure, and finally the quaternary structure. Now, the primary structure of a protein is the specific sequence of amino acids in the chain. So, for instance, this is asparagine, glycine, phenylalanine, and so on. And this particular primary sequence is unique to this specific protein. And as we just discussed, each one of these is held together to the next by a peptide bond. Now, after our primary structure is formed, proteins form a secondary structure. So here, if you look, this is one of our amino acids. Here's the amino group. Here's the central carbon in the R group, and our carboxyl group is hidden from view. This is the carboxyl group that goes with this amino acid. Down here, we have the same thing, an amino group, a central carbon, and its carboxyl group. Now, because these are polar functional groups, it means there's a charge distribution. The partially positive hydrogen on this amino group forms a hydrogen bond with the partially negative oxygen on the carboxyl group of another amino acid that they're not even right next to. So this one might form a hydrogen bond with this one. And because of these hydrogen bonds, the regions of the protein that form secondary structure will take one of two shapes. They will either form a spiral or a helix, known as an alpha helix, or they will make a zigzag, right? Sort of like the lines that you wait in at the amusement park. The amino acid chain will do this and reverse and go this way, and will reverse again and go this way. And the hydrogen bonds will hold it in shape. So, secondary structure has these two shapes, the spiral, the helix, and the beta sheet, the zigzag, and those are held together by hydrogen bonds, which remember are weak, but when you have a whole bunch of them together, it's strong enough to keep the shape. Now, the third level of folding is called our tertiary structure. Tertiary structure forms because of the specific chemical properties of the R groups of those amino acids. So remember, we talked about R groups being, say, polar or nonpolar. In other words, they're hydrophilic or hydrophobic, depending on their properties. Now, hydrophilic things like to hang out together, and hydrophobic things like to hang out together. So here we see that they've colored the types of amino acids red and blue. The blue ones have kind of assembled together and the red ones together. Or another example, here we have in green a bunch of hydrophilic R groups and the amino acids, and in red on the outside are a bunch of hydrophobic ones. So this actually makes a hole in the cell membrane that allows water, which is, if you're hydrophilic, you like water, allows water to pass through here, but the lipids of the cell membrane are happy, and so is this protein, because these are all hydrophobic. So where we put the amino acids with their specific chemistry helps to give the protein its function. All right, so this is chemistry of the R groups. Now, the final level is called quaternary structure. And this is when we have more than one protein that joins together. In other words, a protein complex, which I'm covering up with my video. This particular protein is hemoglobin. Hemoglobin, which is in our red blood cells and helps to carry oxygen, is actually 4 proteins that are connected together. This protein, I have no idea what it is, but you can see that there's a bond connecting this one strand to another strand. So that's this protein's quaternary structure. Not all proteins have this final level. Some proteins function with just one strand.